I've been streaming on Twitch for 11 years now. If you're wondering why you've never heard of me, it's because I've stayed a relatively small streamer for that entire time. You also might be wondering why I've been doing it for so long if I've never really grown. So I wanted to take the opportunity and explain how and why I got into streaming, how I got to this point, and why I keep going. After that, I want to share with you 7 lessons that I've learned in my 11 years that will hopefully help you to either get started on a strong foot or maybe change your direction to something that's a bit more to your liking. I consider my first official stream to be on August 11th, 2014. I was playing Sniper Elite V2 with my cousin, and I can't remember if it was my first time playing the game, but I know it was definitely his, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to just stream it and see what happened. Before that, I had experimented with doing game playthroughs of things like Skyrim and Morrowind and Star Wars Republic Commando, and I was highly influenced by Let's Players like Tobuscus back in the day, and I just wanted to give it a try. But because I didn't use a webcam at the time and my microphone was basically just a toothpick, the comments were less than kind, let's say, and eventually I just kind of stopped doing it. Around the same time, I had shifted my focus to a different channel that was focused on doing Bible study content. I was going through the Bible one chapter at a time and kind of explaining it from a layperson's perspective. When I discovered Twitch, I found myself in Carnage's stream. Now, this is back whenever he only had around 200 or 300 average viewers, so by comparison, he was still a mid-range streamer at the time, and I found it so intriguing what he was doing, because essentially, he was playing, I believe, Arcade, and just sitting there, playing Arcade, and having some of the best discussions with chat that you could possibly hope for at the time. Later, I heard him explain streaming as essentially just sitting on a giant couch with everyone just kind of sitting there with you and telling you what to do, where to go, and just having conversations. And I was really interested in that. I was like, man, this looks so fun. I can do that. So I went and bought a webcam, and I got a slightly better microphone. I didn't have a mount for it, so I ended up just sticking a black sock on top of it so that it wouldn't catch the wind sounds from my fan, and just propped it up on my shoulder. And it was actually decent audio, but there was more to it as to why I started. Sure, Carnage's stream was the push that I needed to actually do it, but there were very deep-seated personal reasons of why I started as well. So back in 2009, my mom and I ended up leaving a very controlling situation that I had been in for all my life up to that point. And if you know anything about controlling manipulative situations, you know how that can impact how you interact or don't interact with people. And whenever I started streaming, I was primarily doing it as a means to learn how to talk to people. Because up to this point, I really didn't know how to even start a conversation, much less keep one going and engage with a person on a deeper level than beyond the most painful small talk you can imagine. So I knew that what I was doing was taking a risk for myself, but I felt very strongly that if I didn't do it, that I wouldn't be able to properly grow as a person in the ways that I knew that I needed to, because I was restricted in the things that I knew that I could do, and I knew it. And I wasn't satisfied with living that way anymore. And I felt that streaming was a really good and hopefully safe way of getting out of that spiral that I was in. Even still, I knew that it was a risk because of how the YouTube comments up to that point had responded to me. It was very, like I said, less than kind kinds of things that were said. And so I knew that showing myself on camera was a risk because I was either going to get accepted because of the fact that I was different or completely rejected because of the fact that I was different. And of course, once you start streaming, you know how you just don't get any viewers for quite some time. And whenever you finally do get someone that says hi in the chat, you kind of don't know what to do. And so I went through all of that awkwardness, and it was pretty great. But what I was so pleasantly surprised to find was that not only was I accepted with the fact that I was different, the fact that I'm different was actually celebrated, and people were cheering me on, telling me to keep going and keep learning. And I was slowly starting to make connections with people beyond, again, the very painful small talk. And some people started coming back, which was to me shocking, because I knew how not entertaining I was. And those returning acquaintances eventually became friends, and some of them I still talk to today. So after a year-ish of streaming, I decided to go to college to be a software engineer. Now, back in 2014, it was very viable for you to just stream whatever you wanted and get viewers and grow. That was not surprising by any metric. But the way that you would continue that growth is through the sheer effort of consistency. So whenever I started college, for around 2, maybe 3 weeks, I was averaging somewhere between 15 and 20 viewers, which was a lot, especially for back then. And I was thinking that I would be able to continue streaming, at least somewhat, during college. But boy, was I mistaken. Whenever you go to engineering school, you live, eat, sleep, breathe, and poop engineering school. So that momentum that I had built over the year-ish that I had been streaming at first was just kind of gone. So I thought that I could just rebuild it during summer breaks. And for the first year or two, I was able to do that. So during those 3 or 4 months between semesters, I was able to rebuild a lot of the momentum that I had in that first year. But then the semester would start again, and I would lose all the momentum all over again. And this would repeat over and over again until I graduated college in 2019. However, by that point, the streaming game, especially on Twitch, had dramatically changed. At this point is when you could clearly no longer just stream and be able to get viewers, because everyone had kind of gotten wind of how easy it was to actually start streaming. And so everyone and their dog started streaming, which led to a oversaturation of streamers that has still persisted to today. And on a practical level, what that meant was that there were far fewer viewers to even watch you, because a lot of those viewers had become streamers. And while there's nothing wrong with that, it seems like it would be pretty obvious how that would become harder for everyone to grow. So you started seeing the meta changing to the necessity to make things like YouTube content and Instagram content and TikTok content while streaming. And for a bit there, it was that you had to create unique content for each platform, which just burned out so many people. But I simply refused to do that because I was stubborn enough to think that I could, after college, just stream consistently again and build up my momentum. And while I did get some momentum back, it was never the same as what it was when I started. So I then started to kind of shift my perspectives on streaming into kind of purely chasing the numbers, as it were. And I'm sure if you've been streaming for some time, you've probably gone through that phase as well, where the numbers and the metrics are all that matter, and your enjoyment goes out the window if it doesn't line up with the numbers. And I'm sure you can also appreciate how fast you can really burn out doing that and just steal your own joy from streaming. And I did that for some time, and I reached a point that I genuinely considered the possibility of stopping to stream. And I took a month off to do some solid soul searching and prayer and thinking, and decided that it wasn't my time to stop, that there was actually still purpose in what I was doing beyond just learning how to be social, because by this point I had learned so much. But I had also met so many people that I genuinely cared about that I simply couldn't see myself not streaming and not interacting with them for the simple sake of I kind of grown to not only love them, but need them. So I shifted again from trying to chase the numbers to trying to foster as strong of a community with the things that I had grown already, while doing and saying and being the things that were most genuinely me. So for example, I stopped going for every new game that had come out just to try and get the scraps of the bigger streamers that were playing that game, or doing something because I saw that that category was doing a bit better at the time, or kind of curtailing the things that I would say and talk about and do because I didn't think that my audience or people that would come in would like those things. And I started just being genuinely me. I started doing the things I liked, regardless of the numbers. I started telling people about Jesus whenever I could because I am a Christian, and that is something that is very important to me. But I did it in as kind and respectful of a way as I could, while still telling the truth, of course. And instead of people leaving, like I kind of expected they would, people actually started coming in. And whenever I had stopped trying to grow, I started growing because I was being as genuine and authentically me as I knew how to be. And then around 2 years ago, Twitch opened up the TOS to allow for multi-streaming with pretty much any other streaming platform. So I started a gaming YouTube channel that was separate from my usual primary channel, and I would do software development things on my main channel, and I would do gaming content on my gaming channel. And all of those things combined has not only revitalized my own enjoyment of streaming, it's also allowed me to meet and interact and befriend so many more people that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. Until now, I'm where I am making this video that you're currently watching. So with all of that being said, I have 7 lessons that I would like to share with you of things I've picked up over the last 11 years. And the first one applies to whether you've been streaming for some time or you're just considering starting to stream now. And that's to understand why you're streaming. Understanding your why will determine so many things about the trajectory of your stream that it's hard to understate how important this is. So for me, like I said, my initial why was to try and push myself to be social and to understand how to talk to people, which then led to the natural consequence of making friends and having connections that I hope that I keep for the rest of my life. But my why has also shifted over time. So it started off as learning to be social, and then it became, I want to actually be a quote big streamer, which then led to, I want to pursue metrics, which then meant I want to pursue milestones, which whenever that all blew up in my face, it shifted again to wanting to be as authentic as I possibly could. And sometimes your why can be rather hidden unless you're willing to be brutally honest with yourself. You might be saying at first that you want to just stream and see what happens and make friends and make the world a better place. But if you're honest with yourself and you really dig down, you might find that your true motive is to, say, push for Twitch partner and try and make a lot of money. And while there's nothing wrong with that, we need to be honest with ourselves about why we're doing what we're doing so that we can not only be authentic in what we do, we can understand why we're doing it and change our trajectory accordingly. And we might also find that the true why isn't what we really want, and we have to reprioritize what we're doing with our streams. And that's okay too. This kind of leads into the second lesson, which is understanding that being a massive streamer has factors that are out of your control and is statistically unlikely to happen. And I realize that that might be hard to hear, but it's true. And we can take the stance that, but there's a chance. But realistically, pushing to be the next XQC or the next Co-Carnage or the next Ninja whenever he was massive or the next whoever will lead to things that you might not be happy with yourself in the short term or the long term doing. So it's worth understanding what you can control, which is yourself, your schedule, your content, and your community. Now, as far as your content goes, something huge that I've learned is to not let anyone, even someone that might be a massive supporter of your stream, control your content, especially if the things that they're trying to get you to do is not sustainable. That will slowly but surely pull you into either burnout or a situation where you're being controlled in a way that you really don't want to be, especially on a personal level. And it can also completely steal the joy of streaming from you. So whenever someone is trying to convince you to do something, especially whenever it comes to monetary support, remember that your content is an extension of yourself. So with that in mind, how do you want to be represented to the world? And I'll leave that up to you to take the meaning as you see fit. As far as your community goes, it's equally important to remember that you set the tone based off of what you don't allow just as much as what you silently allow. So, for example, there was a stretch of time on my stream where my community thought it was a good idea to just absolutely roast me for pretty much everything that I did. And while I'm fine with a bit of, good-natured banter, it was going beyond that and diving deeper into just severe criticism until eventually I just had to tell everyone, look, this is not why I'm streaming. And if this is going to continue, I will stop. So I had to reset the tone based off of the mistakes of what I had silently allowed. And again, I'm completely fine with good-natured banter, but if it starts getting into just constant and consistent, just almost attacks, then that's no fun for anyone. And it can possibly lead into your community starting to do that with each other, which kind of builds its own brand of toxicity. It's also worth noting that whether you're looking to be or not, you are a leader that has influence over the people that choose to spend time with you. So you need to be conscious over the influence that you exert. And you need to ask yourself, again, how do I want to be represented to the world? Because how I am represented to the world also influences not only how people think about me, but also how I might influence them for good or bad. The third lesson is to understand that, quote, making it can look very different to everyone. And this kind of builds upon the first two lessons because we need to understand our why and we need to understand what we want to put into the world. And by doing that, we can identify the goals that we want to pursue. So if one of your goals is to make money, which is fine if you're honest with yourself, it's good to consider how you might be able to use your content or your influence to make money beyond the direct support of your community through things like subs and tips or things like that. In other words, you need to start thinking about this like a business. And this is actually one of my own weak points, and I still struggle in this area. So don't feel bad if you're having trouble figuring that out. The fourth lesson is to multi-stream to at least 2 platforms as soon as you can. The simplest way to multi-stream that I've experienced so far is to use Restream.io. I'm not sponsored by them in any way, but if they end up seeing this and want to talk, let's talk. But Restream allows you to stream to 2 platforms for free with the ability to stream to more platforms at the same time as a subscription plan. However, I think you should start off with both Twitch and YouTube simultaneously. And as you do this, you're going to find that you naturally kind of gravitate towards one platform or another, and that's okay. So once you identify the platform that you primarily want to focus on, understand that platform as much as you possibly can and in as much detail as you can so that you can drive what you do in such a way that will succeed on that platform while still doing something that you find enjoyable or meaningful. So for example, if your goal is to primarily just stream, you might want to prioritize Twitch, but remember that you're going to have a really hard time getting discovered because of how Twitch doesn't have any tools to put you in front of people. It can be done, but it's very long and very tedious. If your goal is to more so make content, I would suggest prioritizing YouTube. But it's worth noting that you're going to need to put in more work and thought if you're going to make content for all of the different avenues that YouTube allows. And consider even there what you want to focus on with the types of content that you make. And that directly leads into the 5th lesson, which I think personally is the most important, if not tied for the most important. And that's to not just stream, but to create with purpose. Now, what do I mean by that? If your goal is to simply stream whatever you're playing at the time, and whoever comes in, and it's totally fine, whatever happens, just keep doing your thing, have fun. But if any of your goals involve growing to any capacity, you need to start thinking beyond just the turning on the stream and playing a game, or turning on the stream, putting yourself in, just chatting and seeing what happens. You need to have some kind of purpose behind what you do, even if it's just something temporary from, say, project to project. So, for example, something that I've started doing is challenge runs in Souls games and in Elden Ring. And while the challenge run itself has purpose, because of the simple fact that it's a challenge run, I also am thinking about how I can make that challenge run into long form and short form content that I can then repurpose for things like YouTube Shorts, or maybe a extended edited playthrough as a single video that kind of focuses more on the humor of the run. Or how I can take a specific game and analyze it in such a way where I can present a perspective on that game that might not be getting explored, which you can see on my gaming YouTube channel where I explore why certain games work. Not how do they work, why do they work from a psychological, a marketing, and from a game design standpoint. And it's a playlist called Why Does Blank Work? And so while I'm making the content live, I'm also conscious of how these things can be used to further my other goals of also growing something on YouTube and also providing opportunities for more people to come in, which then allows me to then have opportunities to tell them about Jesus, because that's one of my primary reasons now of doing this, is having those opportunities not only for content, but more so to tell people about Jesus. So having some kind of short-term and maybe overarching purpose is essential if you really want to consider how to grow your stream or your content in any realistic way. And if you want to see someone that does this exceptionally well, I would highly recommend observing how Doug conceptualizes and executes on his ideas in order to make them content. And I do take some inspiration from how he does things. I don't copy him, but I definitely take some inspiration from his methods. So again, understand the value that you want to put into the world and create to that end. As far as what specifically you should be doing, I would suggest doing something that you're both passionate about and can do for the long term. Something that's sustainable. But it's also worth noting that passion comes and goes, so you can't rely on passion as the single driving force. You need to have something that you tend to come back to at some point, and it's also something you can do in the long term. And you should also be willing and able to experiment within your given purpose. Or even explore just kind of side purposes that things might be interesting to you right now while still kind of maintaining that main core focus. You just need to be careful that you don't slingshot back and forth too quickly or too often, because in my experience, my community doesn't tend to like that whenever I just fly back and forth to too many extremes at a time. So I've learned to kind of transition from thing to thing and have things that are related to what was happening before, but also can easily transition into what I want to do. So in other words, you want to introduce new things slowly and feel out your community's reaction to those things. Lesson 6 kind of builds on that even further, because even though your community might really enjoy something, it's key that you enjoy what you're doing. Because if you don't enjoy what you're doing, that will bleed into your content and people will notice. And then they're not going to enjoy it either. Now, I'm not saying that literally everything you do has to be, something that you absolutely enjoy 100% of the time. There are things that there's just moments of doing it that kind of suck, and pushing through it can be its own form of enjoyment. But on the whole, if you're enjoying something, your core community will also enjoy it. Which leads in to the last lesson, which is that your community makes everything that you're doing so worthwhile. If you think about it, we are doing this for them. They are why we are here. Because if they're not watching, we don't have content. And that's not to say that we use them by any means. If you do that, you're kind of a scumbag. What I mean by that is that the relationships that you build are some of the most important things that you'll probably ever do online. And so it's to remember that not only are they people and they need to be treated as such, they are genuinely there because they want to see you succeed on some level. And there are people that will want to see you succeed in different ways. But overall, they are there because they want you to win and because they care about you on some level. And to remember that and to foster that as much as you possibly can, because without them, we're nothing. And they are also, to me at least, and I think to a lot of us, the primary joy behind what we do. So we need to remember that and to appreciate them for what they do and who they are. And I think that covers the major lessons that I've learned in my 11 years of streaming on Twitch. What do you think? How long have you been streaming? And what have you learned in your own journey? What do you think I've missed? Let me know in the comments. And also, please let me know if you would like to see more videos like this, where I kind of discuss the mindsets behind streaming from the perspective of someone that is a small streamer for so long. Or if you just want to talk about streaming in general, let me know in the comments. So thank you so much for spending time here. I know this was a long one. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like and subscribe button so you can get notified of future things. Also, check the description if you want to check out my gaming YouTube channel as well. And thank you so much for watching. Jesus loves you. I love you. Stay awesome.